Hey guys, Koizi here. Do you guys remember my top 10 unpopular opinions? Yeah, it's my take on the Jazzy Blokes idea for a top 10, except that I expanded beyond the main subject of this channel, animated features. Unfortunately, that top 10 did not do well, so I'll stick to animated features for the redux of the top 10. Besides, there's plenty of unpopular opinions regarding those in this top 10. Ladies, gentlemen, and other genders, I'm Koizi, and these are my top 10 animated film hot takes. Before we get to the list, I may have something special for the honorable mention. Now, for the honorable mention, I would like to do something different. A miniature movie pitch, to be exact. I think that an animated feature based on Fortnite could actually work. Let me explain this. There was an actual pitch for a Fortnite movie being brought to Sony Pictures Animation, and they rejected it due to the recency of the game itself. Now that Fortnite is turning 10 next year, as of 2026, I think this is a perfect time to bring the Battle Royale to the big screen. How exactly? Well, I have a very good idea for it. Do you guys know what Fortnite was originally about? It was a survival game set in a zombie apocalypse, so this Fortnite movie can actually work as a zombie apocalypse movie, since we do have plenty of those films, most notably the Zombieland franchise starring Emma Stone. Also, for the characters of the Fortnite movie, we can just stick to the original characters made for the video game, in order to save movie money, instead of going over budget by adapting the guest characters that the game would go on to include through their crossover collabs. That way, we could have celebrities do the voices of those original game characters, such as Tom Cruise as Jonesy, Jonah Hill as Fishsticks, Gabriel Iglesias as Billy, the list goes on. The animation itself will stick to the source material and elevate its look for the big screen, similar to the Super Mario films from Illumination, which I will talk about later, and my pitch for an animated Skylanders film back in 2023. The score should be done by Theodore Shapiro, who did a great job incorporating multiple music genres into the score of Trolls World Tour, which sounds like a good fit for Fortnite. As for which studios should make this film, well, studio choice doesn't matter that much. This idea of a Fortnite movie can be made reality by literally anyone, so I'm open-minded to the animation studio that actually makes this movie in the near future. Now, onto the list itself. Speaking of the list, I'll be changing up my formula for Koi's countdowns so I can offer something different for videos like these compared to other creators such as Shafrilis and Animat. Anyways, for number 10, this is something that I previously talked about on this channel, but unfortunately, for the 30th anniversary of this franchise, I have to bring it up again. Pokémon the first movie is a bad film, and a rough start to Pokémon as a film franchise. I know that there are some young millennials out there that are too nostalgic for this thing because of their experience seeing it in theaters, but I'm sorry, as an animated feature that just happens to be based on the first generation of these JRPGs, it's a huge mess. The story is just cluttered and has a stupid anti-fighting message, which goes against the concept of Pokémon in the first place. The animation doesn't stray jack shit from the Indigo League series outside of some outdated CGI, which ruins some of the Pokémon battles presented. The characters are barely developed outside of Mewtwo, who is basically the only good thing in this film. And the soundtrack is just cheesy 90s pop, which really makes this movie hold a big ass sign that says, I'm a Gen 1 Pokémon movie. When I watched this entire movie for myself back in 2021 for my full review on New Year's Eve of that year, I was severely disappointed by how bad it was. Before that, this was one of the many animated features that I always wanted to watch. As a Pokémon fan, I wanted to like the first movie, but since I finally watched it almost 5 years ago, I was so let down that I have no idea how some of the sequels turn out once I do a Pokémon movie marathon someday. Fun fact, I have not seen the majority of Pokémon movies outside of the ones I caught on Cartoon Network, and 2019's Detective Pikachu. For number 9, this is also something I previously talked about on this channel. However, unlike the last film, I only talked about this once. From Netflix animation back in 2022, Here Comes the Sea Beast, as a highly overrated ripoff of How to Train Your Dragon. This movie just copies the entire story of the 2010 DreamWorks movie, and swaps out its theme of Vikings and dragons for pirates and sea monsters, plus the addition of an annoying sidekick that turns this movie into also a ripoff of Moana with its kid meets idol storyline, except to de-age the girl protagonist a bit. The animation is good for the most part, but the sea beasts themselves have underwhelming designs that remind me too much of fruit snacks and preschool toys, which is not monstrous enough for a feature film. Speaking of annoying sidekicks, the characters here are unlikable copy-pastes of other animated characters like Hiccup mixed with Maui. Moana herself is a pirate geek, a bootleg version of Stitch, a dark brooding ripoff of John Silver from Treasure Planet, and a red-colored sea version of Toothless. I could not understand what got people into this bland animated kids flick that just happens to be action-adventure. I mean, Strange World does the same type of story as The Sea Beast in the same release year, and that movie does action-adventure with a much better story centered around environmentalism, much better animation with actually creative designs for their creatures, and much better characters that stand on their own, like the gay protagonist Ethan Clegg for example. The Sea Beast may have been one of the biggest animated features on Netflix, but maybe it's not in the same quality as the likes of other Netflix animation movies in that caliber, such as Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, Adam Sandler's Leo, and Coco Studios' In Your Dreams, or the third-party K-pop Demon Hunters from Sony Pictures Animation. For number 8, I have to break something to you guys. Speaking of Sony Pictures Animation, back in the 2010s, the studio was not in good shape with the movies they were putting out. It was nothing but bad sequel after bad sequel after bad sequel, plus the addition of a subpar nativity story, and the infamous smartphone commercial, the Emoji Movie, which did not get any sequel, thankfully. But, what, if I told you that one of those bad sequels is actually of lower quality than the Emoji Movie? That sequel turns out to be the third Hotel Transylvania film, Summer Vacation. This is actually one of the worst animated features that I have ever seen, period, in terms of wide-release theatricals. The story is one big rehash of the 2012 original, except make Dracula into Mavis, and make Mavis into Dracula, and swap the setting from a hotel to a cruise, with no surprises or stakes at all. The characters received little to no development whatsoever, nor did they offer something enjoyable or charming. The soundtrack continues the hip trendy outdatedness of this franchise and cranks that to a new level, and the animation looks even cheaper than the first two films. At least the Emoji Movie looks somewhat cinematic, and the human designs in that film were actually good to look at. This, on the other hand, looks like it belongs in the same direct-to-video catalog as Open Season Scared Silly and Surf's Up to Wave Mania, and that is not good, especially for a computer-animated feature directed by Genndy Tartakovsky, the series creator of Cartoon Network's hits such as Dexter's Laboratory, Samurai Jack, Star Wars Clone Wars, Symbiotic Titan, and recent Adult Swim stuff such as Primal and Unicorn Warriors Eternal. Yes, Hotel Transylvania 3 Summer Vacation, for having the cheapest looking animation and the laziest writing, is a much worse Sony Pictures Animation film than the Emoji Movie, and the worst film in the studio's filmography. For number 7, I want to talk about some good movies for once. To be precise, we are taking a look into a legendary movie franchise. An animated franchise that stayed consistently good, no matter how good each movie is. It is none other than the Toy Story films. The second movie is a masterpiece, and is one of my favorite animated sequels of all time, and I can tell that many people agree with me on that. The fourth movie in 2019 didn't come out as perfect, but it came out as the best of those animated feature four quills. Kung Fu Panda 4 happens to be second best, at least. But, when it comes to the other two Toy Stories, they are still really good movies in their own, and I do applaud the achievements they made, such as movie number 1 being the first wide-release computer-animated film to ever arrive in theaters, and movie number 3 being nominated for Best Picture and Best Adapted Screenplay, but those two films are not as amazing as number 2 and number 4. These Toy Stories do have flaws, such as the first one being a bit predictable and having primitive animation that may have aged better on the toys than it did on the humans, and the third one having that one scene that completely offends me, as an artist who grew up in special ed classrooms. I am talking about the caterpillar room scene, which was not only disgusting, but the designs of those kids really seals the deal for offending autistic kids. That big scene really ruined Toy Story 3 for me. This third installment could have been a masterpiece like the second film, if it wasn't for that offensive caterpillar room scene. But, outside of those huge flaws, Toy Stories 1 and 3 are solid 8 out of 10 installments of such an iconic animated film saga. For number 6, I'm still looking at good movies with some flaws. This time, it's a standalone movie that cements itself as a merchandise juggernaut during two seasons and one aesthetic. I'm, of course, taking another look at The Nightmare Before Christmas. This film makes a solid watch for Halloween or Christmas with a creative story that mixes both holidays, legendary stop-motion animation, funny and likable characters such as Jack Skellington, Sally, Sandy Claus, and Oogie Boogie, and mostly catchy holiday tunes for both holidays. However, the key word here is most. Because two of those songs are kind of overrated, and they hindered the movie a bit. That is, because those songs are annoying. Let me explain this, guys. Back in the early parts of 2020, the year I graduated high school, by the way, before the infamous pandemic, some teachers were pressuring me into wearing 3-button polo shirts, because for some reason, the school district has uniform dress codes, which makes sense for private and academy schools, but not for public schools, where the dress codes are supposed to be more relaxed. Now, what does this have to do with the original version of This Is Halloween, you may ask? Well, I was pressured into wearing one of those stupid polos in the same classroom that was playing the music video of that song on their TV. That annoyance drama ruined my feelings towards this song in its original form. But, to lighten things up, at least the Marilyn Manson cover was actually catchy and badass, and the YouTuber covers were pretty solid as well, even though they couldn't match up to the greatness of Marilyn Manson. As for Kidnap the Sandy Claus, yeah, that song is annoying because of the characters that sing it. These three characters are just little stinking twats that get on my nerves every time they're on screen. That alone makes Kidnap the Sandy Claus an overrated song as well. But, just because there's 2 overrated songs and 3 annoying kids, that doesn't mean The Nightmare Before Christmas isn't a good Halloween plus Christmas flick. For number 5, we're still on the subject of Disney here, but this time I'm talking about something that's underrated. You may have heard a bit about this movie in my Disney animation ranking, but I stand by that Home on the Range is an underrated Disney classic. I grew up with this movie in the mid-2000s, and after rewatching it in 2023, I think it aged pretty well. This film takes the myth of Pied Piper and swapped rats for cows, and the flute for yodeling and banjos. The Pied Piper story is kind of basic here, but that's not the movie's focus. The focus is on the comedy. Oh boy, the comedy in this movie is a hidden gem. The film is surprisingly hilarious due to having the nature of Looney Tunes, similar to The Emperor's New Groove, mixed with the snarkiness of Nickelodeon. It's also quite emotional at times, when it comes to the chemistry between the three cows, and the themes of gentrification and political greed. As for the animation, this is one of the last Disney animated features to be hand-drawn, and this animation looks just as amazing as their other hand-drawn films, and it fits the Looney Tunes kind of tone, just like The Emperor's New Groove. If I have to put a criticism onto Home on the Range besides the basic story, it's that the yodeling itself can get annoying. But at least the animation made those scenes quite colorful. I've heard plenty of talk about underrated movies from Walt Disney Animation Studios, but for me, this country comedy is one of them, whether most people like it or not. For number 4, we're finally going outside of Disney to look into some hyper-stylized animated films. One of which happens to be the 2018 movie that solidified this trend, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and the other one happens to be the once-cancelled Blue Sky classic that Anna Perma and Netflix put out 4.5 years later, called Nimona. Now, these movies are amazing pieces of cinema, and I definitely see the appeal of them. However, they're not the best thing since sliced bread. I must say that Into the Spider-Verse is one of the best animated films of 2018, but not the best one, due to having your typical Spider-Man origin story, except switch the protagonist from Peter Parker to Miles Morales. Nimona, on the other hand, is the best streaming original animated film of 2023, but not the best one overall, due to the ending feeling too similar to Disney's Moana, and the character Todd being a generic bully. On the plus side, both of these films are still fantastic thanks to everything else about them. Into the Spider-Verse had great execution to its Spider-Man origin story that ties into the introduction of the Spider-Verse itself, alongside some groundbreaking animation, a cool soundtrack, and memorable movie versions of some of the Spidey characters. Nimona was still great due to their story consisting of a rebellious adventure that brings back fairy tale satire, discovers themes of self-identity and speaks against discrimination on those who are either autistic or LGBTQ+, their animation being a combination of fantasy and sci-fi and a tribute to the cel-shaded Disney shorts known as Paper Manny and Feast, and such lovable characters to follow such as the title anti-hero herself, Aleister Blackheart and his rival-turned-boyfriend Ambrosius. They may not be masterpieces like Into the Spider-Verse's own sequel, Across the Spider-Verse, I Love Dogs, or the Super Mario Bros. Movie, which I, again, will talk about later, but Into the Spider-Verse itself and Nimona are still revolutionary animated features on their own. For number 3, unfortunately, I have to talk about overrated stuff again. Thankfully, this animated movie is not necessarily bad, but it's still mediocre in my eyes due to a glaring issue. Coming from DreamWorks Animation back in 2010, we had Megamind. This movie is one of the most generic entries of their filmography yet. Seriously, Megamind is just Shrek in the comic book realm. All it did was take the story of Shrek and swap out fairy tales with superheroes and supervillains. But it's just the same plot of the supernatural being who starts to fall in love with a human lady, and that lady gets captured by the actual villain that happens to wear red, and the supernatural being has to go save her, accompanied by a talking animal sidekick, only this time, instead of a donkey, it's now a fish inside a mech. Don't get me wrong, there is some good to be found in this movie, such as the cool animation, the intense comic book action, and the memorable voice acting that came from actors like Will Ferrell, Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill, just to name a few. Those elements do help me understand the appeal of this DreamWorks classic, but they do not make up for the weak writing. Again, Megamind is just Shrek with comic books, and honestly, that's all I see it as. For number 2, this is where we talk about those Mario movies. Honestly, if I have something to say about the ones from Illumination, I think the Super Mario Bros. Movie and the Super Mario Galaxy movie are the perfect film adaptations of not just those Mario games, but video games in general. That is because of the direction that these films took, as animated films. These movies have such clever writing that consist of resonating stories about resilience, siblinghood, and finding your origins, gorgeous animation that embraces the look of the Nintendo franchise, while carefully making it eligible for the big screen, memorable characters that finally get to feel things, with fantastic performances to boot, and some unique and iconic scores from Brian Tyler and Koji Kondo. These two films do something that other video game-based movies don't, and that is to fully embrace the games. Films like Tekken, Five Nights at Freddy's and Sonic the Hedgehog 3 were afraid of some elements that their respective video games had, such as the anthropomorphic animal fighters of Tekken, the jumpscares of Five Nights at Freddy's and the backstory of Shadow and Maria plus multiple Sonic characters of Sonic Adventure 2. Those video game movies had to take creative liberties that make sense for the stories that they told, and I'd admit, these Mario films had creative liberties too, but the creative liberties of those other films came out weak, while Mario's creative liberties came out strong enough for an animated film. These two films can also speak to multiple audiences, whether they play the Mario games or not. I think this branch of the Mario franchise is like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but for animated video game movies. Before its first teaser trailer, the Super Mario Bros. Movie was treated as Illumination's folly, just like how Snow White was treated as Walt Disney's folly. However, after the film's release in 2023, the film was regarded as a phenomenon, just like Snow White was in 1937. I'm going to save this comparison for my top 10 best animated films of 2026, but I'd say that the Super Mario Galaxy movie is the Toy Story 2 or Shrek 2 of video game movies. The critics may be too blind to see it, but the Nintendo plus Illumination Mario duology is nothing short of masterful iterations of the games. For my number 1 animated film hot take, I have talked about this twice on my YouTube channel, just like Pokémon the first movie, but come on. I have to bring it up. Just one last time. The 2017 animated feature Rock Dog is such a great masterpiece, and one of the most underrated animated features of all time. Sure, it's one of those animated films where the main character wants to be a musician, but his father doesn't approve of his dream, all that jazz. But the execution of this story is why Rock Dog is so good. When the Rock Dog himself goes to the big city, the film becomes more about actually trying to make it to the industry, and the ups and downs that comes with doing so. He first auditions for an actual rock band of Animal Friends, but when he gets rejected, he finally gets the opportunity to collaborate with his idol Angus Cattergood. The two anthropomorphs manage to create a song together, and that alone creates such a great chemistry between Bodhi, the Rock Dog, and Angus Cattergood, the idol. The animation has a unique style that takes inspiration from Chinese artwork and adapts it in a Disney kind of sense, and the results, alongside the special effects, is just beautiful. There's very few characters to focus on, yet all of them manage to get plenty of development and have their shining moments. Since this is a movie about making music, there's a few musical moments, and they are awesome. Especially the song Glorious. Seriously, that song goes harder than the newer Dungeons from Grand Chase. Rock Dog is probably one of the only good animated features to come out of Lionsgate, alongside My Little Pony the movie and the two Aardman films they also released under Studio Canal. But it's also living proof that China can provide amazing stuff in terms of animated features, which would later result in the awesome Muja Duology and the upcoming Tom and Jerry The Forbidden Compass, which is the first fully animated Tom and Jerry film with a wide theatrical release. Hopefully, to be exact. I am proud to have this as my #1 animated film hot take, because Rock Dog is one of the greatest animated features that I have seen period. And that was my top 10 animated film hot takes. What do you think of these unpopular opinions? Is this countdown an improvement over the last time I did an unpopular opinions list? Or should I have new hot takes on certain things, even outside of animated films? Let me know in the comments. Why not also like, share and subscribe to this channel for more engaging content like this? And how about clicking on my link tree for my other socials and a couple of ways to support me with real money? This is Koizi, signing out.